Star Wars Jedi 3 has the potential to become the most important game in this trilogy. Fallen Order introduced us to Cal Kestis, and Survivor expanded his journey, his power, his relationships, and his trauma in a much bigger way. But the third game needs to do more than that. Better gameplay, bigger planets, or bigger boss fights will not be enough on their own. This game needs to truly bring Cal's story to its final point. When I think about Jedi 3, there are certain things I absolutely want to see in the third game. First of all, I want to see a stronger connection to the Star Wars universe. What I mean by that is not famous characters showing up every 5 minutes just for fan service, because things like that can very easily damage the story. But if Respawn uses iconic characters in a way that actually adds meaning to Cal's journey, Jedi 3 could become something truly special. Meeting characters like Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, or Maul would be incredible, because Cal is a Jedi trying to survive during one of the darkest and most dangerous periods in Star Wars history. And honestly, the character I want to see the most is Ahsoka. I'm a huge Ahsoka fan, and if a meeting between Cal and Ahsoka is handled correctly, it could be amazing. Both of them are characters who survived in different ways after the fall of the Jedi Order. Both of them have a very complicated relationship with being a Jedi, with the Jedi identity, and with trying to do what is right in the galaxy. Ahsoka does not need to take over the story, but a meaningful encounter between her and Cal could become one of the most unforgettable moments in the series. Obi-Wan could also work really well, but only if he truly has a place in the story. I do not want Jedi 3 to turn into a game that simply throws familiar characters in front of us. If Obi-Wan appears, that scene needs to be emotional, important, and connected to Cal's journey. The same thing applies to Maul, and the same thing applies to anything related to the Darksaber. Seeing these things would be very exciting, but first, they need to serve the story. For me, the best Jedi 3 would be a game that gives us big Star Wars moments while never forgetting Cal Kestis' story. After that, my biggest expectation is a much deeper combat system. Jedi Survivor seriously improved the stance system compared to Fallen Order, and being able to choose different fighting styles felt really good. But in the third game, Respawn needs to take this even further. Jedi 3 should not feel like Survivor with just a few new animations added. If this is truly going to be the final game, then the lightsaber combat system also needs to be the strongest and most complete version in the series. I would really love for classic Jedi forms to play a bigger role in the gameplay. Forms like Makashi, Sorasu, and Gemso could add much more depth to the game. Makashi could be a more elegant, controlled style focused on one-on-one duels. Sorasu could be more defensive, built around blocking, patience, and survival. Gemso could be perfect for players who want a more aggressive, powerful style that puts pressure on enemies. This would make the game feel more connected to Star Wars lore and also make the combat system much more interesting. Of course, there should definitely be new stance options as well. Especially an Ahsoka-style reverse grip fighting style would be incredibly cool. Imagine Cal using a faster, more acrobatic, and more aggressive stance. The animations could be completely different, the attacks could be faster, but the defense could be riskier. This kind of stance would instantly bring a new energy to the combat system. Another weapon style I would like to see is a lightsaber pike. This could completely change the feeling of combat because it would give Cal longer range and a different kind of area control. It could be very effective against groups of enemies, large creatures, or enemies that rush directly at you. But the important thing here is this. New weapons should not just look cool, they should genuinely change the gameplay. And that is exactly what I want from Jedi 3. More options, but meaningful options. But despite all these gameplay improvements, the most important thing is still Cal's character. Respawn has developed Cal really well across 2 games. They turned him from a young Padawan hiding from the Empire into a much stronger, much more exhausted, much more broken Jedi who is still trying to do the right thing. That is why my biggest expectation for Jedi 3 is very simple. Please do not ruin Cal's story. Do not pull the character in a random direction just to be shocking. Do not make the ending feel forced. Cal's journey started strongly, and his ending needs to be just as powerful. Cal is no longer just an ordinary Jedi character. Players genuinely love him. We cared about his pain, his friendships, his fears, his anger, and the way he still tries to remain good inside all this darkness. That is why the third game needs to be very careful. It can be darker, it can be more emotional, and it can put Cal into very difficult decisions, but it should never forget who he is. No matter what the ending is, it needs to feel earned. I do not necessarily expect the story to have a happy ending, but I do want it to have a meaningful ending. Maybe Cal survives and finds a new purpose. Maybe he protects Kata and tries to build something new on Tanalorr. Maybe he has to make a major sacrifice. Maybe he steps away from the Jedi path in a different way. Respawn can go in many different directions, but whichever path they choose, it needs to feel right for Cal's character. Because Cal's story has been very good so far, and I do not want a story like this to end with a messy, rushed, or ridiculous finale. Another major expectation I have is for the dark side to be explored more seriously. Survivor showed us that Cal is not completely immune to anger, fear, and desperation. There is a darker side inside Cal, and that makes him a more interesting character. That is why I do not want the dark side in Jedi 3 to remain just a short scene or a temporary power. It should be a real part of the story. Maybe it should also take up a bigger place in the gameplay, but this should not mean Cal suddenly turns into a villain. It should make the player feel both the temptation and the danger of that power. Dark side force powers could be incredible if done properly. More aggressive force abilities, harsher finishing moves, darker animations, and moments where Cal feels like he is losing control could make the game much more intense. But the game also needs to show that this power comes with a cost. The dark side should feel tempting because it makes you stronger, but it should also feel dangerous because it changes Cal. That inner conflict could make Jedi 3 much more emotional. I also think it would be great if the third game started Cal in a darker place. He does not need to start as a full dark side user, but seeing a more tired, angrier, and more broken Cal after Survivor could be very powerful. Maybe he fights more aggressively at the beginning of the game. Maybe his behavior has changed. Maybe the people around him notice that something is wrong with him. A start like this would immediately make Jedi 3 feel like it is telling a more mature and heavier story. The customization side definitely needs to be better as well. I want to see real Jedi robes, darker cloaks, hooded outfits, classic Jedi looks, and more serious clothing options for Cal. Survivor took a good step forward with customization, but Jedi 3 could take it much further. The game needs to give us the chance to shape what kind of Jedi we want Cal to look like. A traditional Jedi, a dark and lonely warrior, a more armored survivor, or something in between. And yes, the poncho should return, because at this point, it feels like part of Cal's identity, but customization should not stay purely visual. Outfits, armor pieces, or lightsaber parts could provide small gameplay bonuses. It does not need to be too extreme, because I do not want the game to turn completely into a loot and stat grinding system, but small bonuses would make customization more meaningful. For example, one outfit could increase defense, another could speed up force regeneration, and another could support a more aggressive playstyle. That way, players could shape not only how Cal looks, but also how he fights. The planets also need to feel bigger, deeper, and more meaningful. I do not want big maps just for the sake of big maps. I want planets that tell stories. I want living, dangerous, mysterious locations that are connected to the main story. Survivor did some good things with exploration, but in Jedi 3, every planet needs to feel truly important. More hidden areas, better side paths, deeper lore, and stronger reasons to return to certain locations would make exploration much more satisfying. Tanalorr especially needs to be important. After the ending of Survivor, Tanalorr carries huge potential for Cal and the people around him. That is why I do not want Jedi 3 to waste Tanalorr. It could become a base, a safe zone, or a hub that we improve over time. Gathering people there, developing areas, unlocking new sections, protecting it from threats, and truly feeling like we are building something new in the middle of chaos would be amazing. This could give the game a much stronger emotional center. Side content should also be broader. Holotactics in Survivor was a fun idea, but Jedi 3 could expand these kinds of things much more. It does not need to take over the whole game, but a deeper minigame or side activity could give players more reason to spend time in the world. Gwent in The Witcher 3 is a very good example of this. It started as a small side activity and became one of the most beloved parts of the game. Jedi 3 could build a fun, strategic system like that, connected to its own characters and world. In the third game, I also want to see more enemy variety and a better lightsaber feel. The lightsaber should truly feel dangerous. Of course, this is a game, and balance matters, but sometimes it should not feel like we are hitting enemies with a glowing stick instead of a lightsaber. Stronger reaction animations, tougher duels, better dismemberment effects, and enemies that force us to use different stances would make the combat much more satisfying. If this is the final game, the combat system needs to feel sharper than ever. At the end of the day, what I want from Star Wars Jedi 3 is a finale that truly respects the previous two games. I want iconic Star Wars moments, but I do not want cheap fan service. I would love to see Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, Maul, or something connected to the Darksaber, but only if it genuinely fits the story. I want deeper combat, more Jedi forms, better customization, dark side powers, stronger planets, and more meaningful side content. But most importantly, I want Cal's story to end in a powerful, emotional, and character-faithful way. If Respawn gets this right, Jedi 3 may not just be another Star Wars game. It could become the best game in the trilogy and one of the strongest modern Star Wars stories. But now I'm curious what you think. What is the one thing you absolutely want to see in Star Wars Jedi 3? Would you want Ahsoka to be in the game? Would you like Cal to struggle more with the dark side? Do you want deeper lightsaber forms? Make sure to write it in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss this kind of content. I'll see you in the next video.